Let me read it to you. He who has various debts of the same kind in favor of one and the same creditor may declare at the time of making the payment to which of them the same must be applied, unless the parties so stipulate, or when the application of payment is made by the party for whose benefit the term has been constituted. Application shall not be made as to debts which are not yet due. If the debtor accepts from the creditor a receipt in which an application of the payment is made, the former cannot complain of the same unless there's a cause for invalidating the contract.
Article 1252 of the Civil Code is about the application of payments. By definition, application of payments is the designation of the debt to which should be applied the payment by a debtor who has various debts of the same kind and in favor of one and the same creditor. This means that when we talk about the application of payments, obligor A has two or more debts to obligee B, and these debts are of the same kind. So we ask the question, when obligor A pays obligee B a certain amount of money, to which debt will the payment be applied on? Is it debt A, debt B, debt C, or which one? Let us dive straight to an example to help us understand the nature, requisites, and rules of Article 1252. Kristen owes Trisha the following with their corresponding due dates. Debt A, $15,000 payable on November 1. Debt B, 5 sacks of rice worth $5,000 on November 5. Debt C, $5,000 payable on November 8. Debt D, $9,000 payable on November 12. Debt E, $10,000 payable on December 15. Question number 1. Supposing it is November 12 and none of these 5 obligations have been fulfilled yet. Kristen then decides to pay Trisha 5,000 pesos and apply her payment to debt B, which consists of 5 sacks of rice worth 5,000 pesos. Will the obligation be extinguished? The answer is no. Kristen cannot pay cash to fulfill her obligation of giving Trisha 5 sacks of rice. According to Article 1244, she must deliver the very thing agreed upon, which is the 5 sacks of rice. Question number 2. Suppose that on November 12, Kristen has 8,000 pesos. Will she be able to apply her payment to debt A? How about debt C? If yes, why? If no, how come? The answer to this question is both yes and no. Let's start with debt A. The answer is no. There cannot be an application of payment since Kristen only has 8,000 pesos and debt A is worth 15,000 pesos. This tells us that the obligee cannot be compelled to only receive a part of the payment. Trisha ought to receive the 15,000 in full from Kristen. For further understanding, check out Article 1248. Now let's proceed with debt C. Can Kristen apply her 8,000 payment to pay debt C worth 5,000 pesos? The answer is yes. But wait, the money she has is more than the amount of her debt. Kristen then can tell Trisha the obligee that she will apply the remaining 3,000 to debt B. This is allowed if Trisha does not object. Supposing this is what happens, Kristen has now fulfilled her obligation to Trisha completely for debt C, but only partially for debt D, which now has a balance of 6,000 pesos. Let's proceed with question number 3. Since we now know that Kristen can apply the excess of her payment for debt C to debt D, is it possible if she applied the excess to debt B instead of debt D? The answer to this question is no, because debt B is not the same kind as debt C. Article 1252 deals with various debts that are of the same kind. The preceding examples tell us an important general rule in terms of the application of payments. The debtor always has the chance, first choice, as to which debt he or she is applying his or her payment to. However, he or she ought to indicate these information at the time that he or she is making the payment. This leads us to 2 succeeding but equally important rules. One is that once the debtor applies his or her payment to, for example, debt A, he cannot later on change it to debt B unless the creditor allows the change. And the other is that supposing the debtor does not exercise his or her right to indicate which debt he or she is applying his or her payment to, then the creditor can make the designation by specifying in the receipt which debt has been paid. Question number 4. Supposing Kristen did not leave a note on which debt she will pay, and Trisha therefore decides for her. However, upon receiving the receipt, Kristen does not approve of Trisha's designation of her payment. Can she complain about it? The answer is yes, because though Trisha can designate it, it still has to be with the consent of Kristen, the creditor. Once Kristen accepts the receipt of her payment given by Trisha, this is regarded by the law as a contract wherein Trisha's chosen designation of Kristen's payment is accepted by the latter. It can no longer be revoked in quotation unless there is a cause for invalidating the contract. Examples of such is when the acceptance of receipt was a mistake, done under influence, and etc. Question number 5. Supposing Trisha, the obligee, does not apply the payment as well, which of the obligations will then be fulfilled? The answer is, the obligation fulfilled will be the most onerous debt to Kristen, the debtor among those due. Question number 6. But what if the debts are the same in nature and equal in burden? The answer is, the payment shall then be applied to the debts proportionately, provided that Kristen follows all the requisites for the application of payments. Question number 7. Assuming that it is November 12, can Kristen pay her debt of $10,000 that is payable on December 15? The answer is no. Kristen cannot pay her debt of $10,000 due on December 15 because it is still November 12. However, only in 2 particular circumstances can Kristen do otherwise. One is if there is a stipulation that allows Kristen to apply her payment to debts not yet due. And 2 is if the date due of December 15 was made for the benefit of either Kristen or Trisha and not both of them. For further understanding, check out Article 1196. And that wraps up Article 1252.